Gun shop employees of Reddit. What are some red flags that have caused you to deny the sale of a firearm? Story 1. When I first got out of high school, I worked in a pawn shop as the guitar and drums guy. My main job was music and stereo sales, plus general cleanup, but every now and then I had to work the gun counter. I grew up around guns, knew the difference between a shotgun and a rifle, and even got my NRA gun safety certification as a kid. Still, I was much happier slinging guitars. The gun department had three kinds of regular customers: off-duty soldiers, weird old collector dudes, and bikers. I would later learn that the bikers were running stolen guns through our shop, and the regular gun guy was playing fast and loose with the ATF forms, but that's a story for another day. One day, I was stuck behind the gun counter when a young couple came in with a baby in the mother's arms. The father was browsing stereo equipment but wandered over to the gun counter, eyeballing the pocket rockets. The mother bounced the baby, trying to look unconcerned. But when he asked to see a little Raven .32, she sucked her teeth and looked away. He seemed to be doing it playfully to annoy her, but she wasn't having it. I checked to make sure the weapon was clear, popped out the magazine, and handed it to him. He then said, "Hey girl," to get her attention, and pointed the gun at her and the baby. What a jerk. I nearly lost my mind. I calmly asked him to hand me the pistol, put it back in the display case, and lock it. I told him I was sorry, but I would be unable to sell him a firearm. I added that he was free to go elsewhere to buy a gun, but what I had just seen him do was exactly how people end up in the newspaper. He blew off a little steam at me, but I think she was grateful, and they left. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I managed a gun shop for 6 years. A few incidents stick out right away. Several denials over the years occurred because the person appeared high or intoxicated. One memorable case involved a man coming in to buy a gun that someone else had already tried to buy and had been denied by the state. In Tennessee, background checks are handled at the state level rather than directly through the federal system. The second man came in a couple of hours later, asking for a specific make, model, and caliber of a used gun. It seemed suspicious, so I outright asked if he was trying to buy it for his buddy. He admitted it, but tried to argue that it didn't matter. I explained straw purchase laws to him, showed him a pamphlet warning he could go to federal prison, and he decided against attempting the purchase. Another involved a young couple who came in to buy a gun. The man claimed it was for him and had a Tennessee ID, but I overheard him say they lived in Mississippi. When I asked, he said she lived in Mississippi, but he still lived in Tennessee. I also overheard them talking about when we get home and that they hadn't seen their psychiatrist to refill their medications. Another few stand out. One involved a man who was discussing with his buddy how they had been somewhere else just before coming to my store and how he didn't understand why his buddy had been denied for the same gun. Another was a man who claimed he was buying a firearm as a gift for his roommate. While it's technically legal to purchase a gun as a gift, most stores want the recipient to fill out the paperwork. When the roommate refused, we denied the sale. One man openly admitted he had been convicted of a felony but intended to mark no on the form. The background check would have caught it, but I denied the sale before it got that far. Finally, a woman came in saying she needed a gun to protect herself from witches. She claimed her neighbors were witches and were casting spells on her. Story 3. A man came in wanting his first gun. We discussed rifles, shotguns, and handguns, but he was certain he wanted a pistol. I spent about an hour showing, explaining, and answering questions. By the end, he decided on a Glock 19. It was neither the most expensive nor the cheapest option. We began the paperwork, but his address did not match his license. The form requires a valid government-issued ID with a current address. I told him he needed to update his license. The online process also required a new photo, so he went to the Department of Public Safety, updated his address, got a new photo, and returned 3 days later. We completed the background check and discussed ammunition. He chose a box of self-defense rounds and 2 boxes of range ammo. At checkout, he was short $20 and went to the bank to get more cash. After completing the transaction, he left, seemingly excited to go shooting. The next day, we received a call that the night before, he had used it on himself. After all that time and effort, choosing a gun, getting the paperwork, buying ammunition, it was a tragic outcome. It shows that sometimes there are no obvious red flags to notice. On a clearer red flag story, a man came in who seemed drunk. There was no smell of alcohol on his breath, but his speech was slurred, and he was a bit unsteady. He wanted a shotgun for home protection. He was alone. His wife had recently divorced him. Bouncing a check is a felony, and combined with 3 other warning signs, it was a clear strikeout. He passed the background check, but as a seller, we can refuse a sale if we feel it is necessary. We told him he was denied, which was likely in his best interest. When he asked if we would write him a new check, we returned the original. The decision was made partly out of concern for his well-being, and partly due to the risk of a scam attempt. Story 4. I used to work at a recently bankrupt big box sporting goods store for over 15 years. Best denial of sale. A grandfather, father, and son, senior, junior, and the third, all came in separately to try to use the same permit to buy guns. The permits are issued by the police department after a background check for one individual only. On the permit, they had left out the senior, junior, and third designations, misspelled their surname, and made up a date of birth. If your identification has senior, junior, or third on it, then the gun permit must have that too. Also, if you cannot spell your own name or remember your birthday, that is not a good sign. Any one of these things is an automatic rejection. Upon denial of the sale, each of them physically threatened me, promised that I was on a list now, and said I should watch my back because of all the police officers they knew. Later that week, we got a call from the police. It turned out that whichever one of them obtained the permit had deliberately put the wrong information on it to bypass the background check. I am not sure how this slipped past the police. None of them was able to pass the background check. If I remember correctly, Junior had an active warrant, and we were told to call the police if any of them ever came back into the store. Surprise, the other two of them had warrants as well. Dumbest denial of sale, huh? A couple came in who had just completed a handgun safety course. They proudly showed me their paperwork and began looking at guns. They were waiting for a friend who would help them choose what to buy and who was going to take them shooting the next day. While they waited, they proceeded to lecture another customer and me on various guns they were examining. About 75% of the information they shared was wrong. The one mistake I clearly remember is that they apparently believed that for Glocks, the model number indicates the caliber. This is somewhat true, but they thought a Glock 17 fires a 17 caliber round, which they believed was 17 millimeters long. Following that logic, a Glock 21 would fire a 21 caliber round that was 21 millimeters long, and so on. Then the man had his wife point a pump shotgun at his face so he could look down the barrel and try to pull the trigger. He said he wanted to see the action of the gun to make sure it worked. Neither of them checked to see if the gun was empty. They simply assumed it was. They became angry when I took the gun away, told them I would not sell them a firearm, and asked them to leave immediately. Up to this point, the other customer had just been amused by the couple. Once they looked down the barrel and pulled the trigger, that customer started yelling at them about how moronic their actions were. They could not grasp how dangerous and foolish what they had done was, and countered by claiming the gun was clearly broken because it did not go click. In reality, the gun was not cocked, and the action was open. Worst denial of sale. A friend had just turned 21 and was flying into town for a long holiday weekend. During his stay, he planned to pick up about 4 or 5 guns. I set aside some firearms for him to look at, as he was supposed to stop by on Friday night after his arrival. When he arrived on Friday, he and a bunch of our friends decided to go get dinner and some drinks instead of coming by to see the guns. He called me to let me know he would come by on Saturday instead. Not a problem. I was opening that day anyway, and ended up joining them for drinks later that evening. On Saturday afternoon, he finally rolled into the store looking very hungover. He looked over the firearms I had set aside for him and eventually decided on 4 different guns. I started him on the paperwork and noticed an issue with his permit. The police department had made a mistake. They had listed the issue date and expiration date as the same day. The permit had expired the same day it was issued and was only valid for that single day. He could not purchase any guns and would have to fly back to his hometown to get the permit reissued, but the police department was closed for the holiday weekend. He had picked up his permit on Friday before heading to the airport. Story 5. I worked in the sporting goods department at Kmart in the early 90s. At the time, there had been a local incident where a man bought a shotgun from Walmart and went to a nursing home where his ex-wife worked. One night, I was stocking ammo when a woman approached me about buying a 12-gauge shotgun for her 10-year-old son. She asked a lot of questions, and I asked about her son, eventually convincing her to start him off with a .22. She settled on a 10-lash .22, and I began the paperwork when I noticed she had placed her large purse on the counter. The bag was huge with mesh ends, and as I moved around, I realized she was subtly nudging it to point toward me. A chill ran down my spine as I understood I was being recorded. Looking at her driver's license, I recognized her name from the local CBS affiliate. I was selling a gun to an undercover reporter. Great. Suddenly, I went into full CYA mode. I grabbed the yellow pages, found hunter safety instructors, and told her she should take her son to get proper training, giving her several numbers to call. I handed her a hunting regulation book and grabbed a better trigger lock, suggesting she buy it. I don't remember picking them up, but suddenly a cleaning kit, ear protection, and glasses were in my hands. I was internally freaking out. I checked her form and called my manager to approve the sale, trying to subtly let him know who she was while he cracked jokes and commented on the massive pile of safety equipment she was buying. After ringing up the sale, she thanked me for the help and left. I told the manager who she was, and he went pale. He called the store manager, who contacted corporate, and everyone started freaking out. They paid me to sit around until the 10 o'clock news came on, and sure enough, it led with, "After the shooting at location, we wanted to see how easy it is to buy the same gun that was used in the incident." It turned out she had purchased it at Walmart before coming to my store. As they played the footage from both purchases, an expert critiqued the Walmart associate's sale, pointing out several mistakes he had made. Then the expert reviewed my sale and commended nearly everything I did, including convincing her to start her son with a smaller caliber and suggesting safety instructors. He rated me an A and the Walmart employee a D, maybe D-. I was relieved. Corporate was so pleased that I received a $500 gift card and 2 paid days off. Aside from the occasional 2 a.m. customer trying to buy a gun while drunk, no sales after 9. That was the one sale that really stood out as flag-inducing. 2 years there, and for the most part, gun people were the easiest customers to deal with. For those across the pond, Super Kmarts are superstores. The one I worked in was nearly 24,000 square meters. It was a full-size department store combined with a giant supermarket, including a fresh bakery, butcher shop, pharmacy, video rental, bank, barber, and more. You could conceivably do all of your shopping in one store and pay at a single register. It was open 24 hours, so no matter what shift you worked, you could get your shopping done, unless you needed a gun, fishing, or hunting license, which were only available from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. We have a lot of space here in the States, and we try to fill it. The Super Walmart down the street was even bigger. Story 6. I've denied quite a few sales, many due to suspected straw purchases, as mentioned elsewhere in the thread. The most interesting case was probably a man who wanted to buy a tactical shotgun for home defense. He was asking more questions about the background check than most, but that wasn't unusual. Some people get nervous about an old underage drinking ticket showing up. No problem there. The odd part was that he wanted me to run the background check without actually buying a gun, which I cannot do. So we picked out a firearm, but he said he needed to move some money around. I got him to apply for a credit card, which he did, and then we returned to complete the transaction. At this point, it became clear that he was socially awkward, or worse. I took his driver's license as he began filling out the paperwork, and was already leaning toward denying the sale, even if the background check went through. Once I had his license, I Googled his name and birth date and saw that he had a criminal record. I nearly laughed when I saw that one of his charges was for fishing without a license. As I kept scrolling, I noticed his most recent charge was for resisting a police officer, exactly 2 years ago. I had already decided to deny the sale, but he made it easy by answering yes to one of the disqualifying questions. More recently, a group of 6 younger people came in to look at guns, 1 girl and 5 guys. She wanted to buy a gun, but it was clear it was not really for her. She did not know much about them. Add to that the fact that the entire group reeked of drugs and it was an easy decision. By the time she wanted to make a purchase, 3 of the 6 had already disappeared. When I explained that I could not sell them a firearm and why, they were neither offended nor surprised. I've also had a kid answer a disqualifying question incorrectly, and his mother got upset, insisting she could buy the gun for him, which is obviously a no-go. When I told her she could not, she grabbed his form, ripped it into quarters, and said, "Well then, we'll just go to your competitor." At that point, I promptly called not only that competitor, but several others in the area, providing their names and information. Good luck with that. On the other end of the spectrum, I've had a man get nice denied, which typically only happens for good reason. People get delayed fairly regularly, and nice can be slow about updating background checks, but delays usually occur only when there is a valid issue. Anyway, this guy was livid, but not at the staff. He requested that we hold the gun for him while he sorted out the issue. We agreed to a limited hold to appease him, knowing it could take months or longer to get the problem resolved and a valid U-pin. To our surprise, he returned within the week with a judge's order, and then came back a couple of weeks later with his issued U-pin. I've got plenty of other stories, but most of them involve drugs, alcohol, or suspected straw purchases. Story 7. I worked at a big box store for a few months, and I have so many stories. Numerous people came in smelling of weed. This was in Denver. I couldn't care less if someone smokes, but I was never going to sell a gun to someone who was obviously high. Get out. The biggest red flag was when someone walked in saying things like, "I just need a gun, any gun." I'd usually ask a few questions they wouldn't answer, and instead they'd ask me things like, "How long is the background check? I need it today." Or, "Does it come with ammo? I am going to need ammo. Get out." When I was very new, just a couple of weeks in, I had a woman act this way. I wasn't seasoned enough yet to just deny her, so I let her see a pistol. Standard practice is to clear the gun, show it's not loaded, drop the magazine, open the action and slide, then hand it to the customer. She asked me to show her how it worked, so I did. I handed it to her a second time, magazine removed, and she closed the slide and pulled the trigger. She said, "Oh, I thought you loaded it. Get out." I called the cops on a woman who came in, clearly high with her 2 young kids who should have been in school. She wanted to see a high point, the cheapest pistol, and told me flat out, "I have to take out the trash." The police showed up within minutes. There were so many straw purchase attempts, and you get good at spotting them. One stands out to me. A man covered in tattoos, carefully cultivating a gangster look, but obviously a poser. No real gangster would walk into a big box store to buy a gun. His girlfriend tried to act like it was for her, but she didn't know anything, so he kept answering my questions. I told them to leave, explaining that straw purchases are illegal. The man completely lost it, yelling, cursing, and claiming I was denying the sale because they were black of all things. Another time, a very polite, well-dressed gentleman came in wanting to purchase a shotgun. He seemed knowledgeable about guns, and I figured it would be an easy sale. His background check was taking a while, so I was just chatting with him when not 2, but at least 6 cops came flying in. Normally they call us and only send 2 officers, who approach politely, talk to the person for a minute, and then escort them out. These officers didn't even ask the man to identify himself. Sometimes there really are no obvious red flags. Story 8. I feel bad about profiling, but when a woman comes in knowing exactly what model she wants, yet acts terrified when I go to put it in her hands, that's a red flag. In those cases, we tend to feel things out much more carefully before proceeding. Slightly related, a girl once came to pick up a transfer she had shipped in. It was a Draco, which we don't sell because it's so popular with gangs in the area. "I am picking up a gun that was sent here," she said. "Okay, what was it?" I asked, knowing the only thing we had come in was that Draco. I don't know. I got it in my email." "So you bought a gun, paid for it, had it sent here, but have no idea what it is?"
Yeah.
I pulled out the Draco. She said yes, but looked utterly reviled and flabbergasted when I handed it to her and asked her to use the charging handle. "I am sorry, ma'am. I have every reason to believe you're getting this for someone else, which is a felony. We're sending this gun back immediately." "Nuh-uh. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." I said, "Yes, ma'am. Please have them contact us." Story 9. I used to cover the sporting goods area at Walmart. I wasn't authorized to sell guns or anything. Mainly, I covered brakes and sold fishing and hunting licenses. One guy came in late in the year when it was pretty cold, wearing only a tank top, which immediately stood out to me. Since I was covering the counter, he came up asking to buy a gun. I explained that the associate had just gone to lunch and would be back in about an hour if he wanted to do other shopping, or I could try to find a manager, but that might take some time as well. He suddenly flipped out, yelling and pounding the counter, demanding I sell him the gun or he would pull me over the counter and kick my buns. I told him there was nothing I could do and that if he threatened me again, I would have him removed from the store. He screamed more profanities and started storming away. The ZMS happened to be a few aisles over and came over to ask what happened. As I explained, he came back and got in her face, ranting about how every time he tried to buy a gun there, no one would sell to him and always had some excuse. She backed off and radioed AP to come remove him. In frustration, he punched the display case and then left. It turned out he was someone with a mental illness, not surprising in my town, and had been denied several times before. A week later, a woman came in trying to buy the same gun while I was covering the area again. I knew the associate would be back soon, and I knew how to get things started. As I was collecting her information, she mentioned that her husband wanted the gun and that she was just picking it up for him. Putting together the other clues, I realized she was the wife of the angry guy from before. When the associate returned, I filled them in on the situation and recommended not selling the gun. I never found out what happened, but I left not long after. Hopefully, they denied her as well. Story 10. Once, a couple came in. She wants a Glock 40, he said. I took them to the case, had her show me her ID, cleared the gun, and went to hand it to her. She jumped back, disgusted at the sight of it. He grabbed it, looked at it for a second, and said, she'll take it. She never once touched the gun. Obvious straw sale. I told 2 people they were totally incompetent today because they haven't shot my gun since New Year's. I literally almost yelled at them. You realize those bullets come down, children are outside shooting fireworks, and you're shooting wildly in the air. You may have already ended a kid playing in the street. How could you be so irresponsible and reckless? You should not own any firearms, period. They just said, yeah, you're right. Can I see that one? It didn't faze them at all. Story 11. I've had several convicted felons try to buy guns from me at gun shows. I don't know why they thought there were no background checks at gun shows, but anyway. One of them was a younger black guy who also had more charges pending. I just told him the background system was running slow that day and to walk around and check back in a few minutes. Then I contacted the girl at the state police and she sent a trooper. She couldn't tell me his charges, but she said he was a drug dealer and a very stupid one. There was also a guy who worked the gun shows selling ammo. So he wasn't an FFL, a licensed gun dealer. We weren't allowed to carry inside the building, but he once showed me his piece and made it clear he would always be carrying. At one show, he accidentally discharged his gun inside the building and got arrested. In the storefronts I've dealt with, you get all sorts of folks. The most annoying are the "I wish someone would" types, eager to show off their Taurus 1911 and hoping someone gets froggy. Then there are the complete fools who want a mil-spec stripped lower and swear they can sneak a Glock through airport security. They're mostly harmless. It's just about knowing how to handle people. Another convicted felon who tried to buy a gun from me was somewhat unexpected. An older man and his younger grandson came up, and the older man wanted to buy a gun. Unfortunately, his eyesight wasn't good, so his very thug-looking grandson had to read and help him fill out the paperwork. While this was happening, an undercover state trooper asked me to get the grandson's information, which I did. It turned out the grandson was clean, so I proceeded with the sale. However, when I ran the older man, it turned out he had forgotten he had a felony. The same state trooper then came over and took him to jail. People seem to treat gun shows like there are no rules, when in reality, they're often a much more controlled environment than any of the gun shops I've worked at. Story 12. I manage a gun shop, and I've got quite a few stories that I will keep short and sharp. One time, a man and a woman came in, and she chose a rifle. I caught the man on camera trying to slip money into her hand, so I canceled the sale immediately. Another time, a drunk man came in. He had prepaid for a gun over the phone. When I asked him to fill out the form, he just said, "Looks good to me," and handed it back. He had clearly driven himself. I had the owner call the police while I stalled him by asking him to complete the form again. He was so intoxicated, he could not even fill it out. Realizing this, he left before the police arrived. Then there is the no smell of pot rule. I have had people I personally know come in smelling like weed to buy a gun, since I knew I had to cancel their sale. One man came in to pick up a layaway firearm. He kept asking about warranty coverage if it was stolen and bragged about riding around with a loaded bolt-action rifle in his vehicle for emergencies. He even tried to discuss black market suppressors. When we were ringing him up, he got confused when we told him we owed him $100, which we handed him. He flipped out, ranted about how we had violated his rights, and stormed out saying he would buy elsewhere. Another red flag was a likely illegal immigrant trying to buy a firearm. His signature on the form did not match his license. His ID seemed fake, and his answers about citizenship contradicted themselves. I have also seen groups come in, look at pistols, and have one person ask all the questions. But when it comes time to buy, someone else steps in to do the paperwork. I always card everyone at that point, and sure enough, the one asking the questions is under 21. The same thing happens with groups where everyone is of age, but it is clear they are trying to buy for a prohibited person. That is always a no-go. Here is another one. A previous customer, let us call him A, came in with his buddy B to purchase a pistol. I smelled weed but could not tell where it was coming from. B admitted to smoking, so I told them both it would be best if A came back another day. A had never smelled of weed before during previous purchases. The next day, A came back with no scent of weed, just like before. I had no reason to believe he smoked, as B had already admitted to it. He bought his gun and left. Later that night, B returned looking to buy the same gun. We told him that since he had admitted to smoking, we could not sell him a firearm. B then claimed he had only said that so A could buy the gun, insisting A was the one smoking all along. He became upset when I told him he had aided in a felony offense and that neither of them was welcome in the store again. At that point, there were 6 openly armed people in the room. He started making excuses, got loud and angry, and began slamming his hands on the glass counter. We told him to leave immediately. He headed to the door but suddenly turned around, pounded on the glass again, and got even louder. That sudden turn startled us, and he quickly got the hint when he saw our hands on our pistols, ready to draw. Even if that man had a firearm, it would have been a losing fight for him. Luckily, he was only inquiring about his first firearm. Here is another one. A man and his wife traveled about 45 minutes to get to us and asked about an AR we had on the shelf. After a few minutes of conversation and questions, he decided he wanted to buy it. His wife started filling out the paperwork, but we told him it was clear the firearm was for him, so he needed to fill it out himself. He said he had left his wallet at home and his wife vouched for him. We told him he was welcome to buy it if he brought his ID and completed the paperwork after retrieving it. Of course, he became upset about how far he had driven and insisted that neither he nor his wife was prohibited. A few hours later, we found him ranting about us online while explaining the situation. Everyone collectively told him how suspicious it looked from a dealer's standpoint and that he should simply return with his ID, since we had already given him the opportunity to do so. Story 13. Former gun store manager here. I worked behind the counter as a salesman, trainer, and eventually store manager for about 8 years. Some of the more memorable red flags I have encountered, in no particular order: The customer handed me a driver's license with a hole punched through the middle. "Sir, this identification is no longer valid," I told him. "Oh, that is cool," he replied, pulling out a second identification from his pocket. "Sir, this identification has been cut in half and taped back together. It is also not valid," I said. "Okay, I have another one," the customer said as he pulled out yet another similarly voided card. I instructed him to obtain a valid state-issued identification card from the Department of Motor Vehicles. He ranted about how terrible the Department of Motor Vehicles was and left on his own. Standing about 2 feet away from me and muttering to his friend loud enough for me to hear, he said, "Hey, you mind getting that gun for me? I cannot buy them myself anymore." Having a creepy conversation with me about how domestic violence laws are unfair. That man eventually received a citation for domestic violence and was banned from the store. My mom took out a restraining order against me last week. A customer said, this man was not technically buying a gun, but pawning the one he had purchased from us the previous week, as he could no longer legally possess it. It also meant he would be denied all future sales, and it was so strange that I had to include it. "Hey man, how much for a gun?" one man asked. "Well, sir, we have firearms for all budgets. Our cheapest are going to be around $200, though we have a few cheaper ones that I do not personally recommend. An average handgun is probably going to be around $400 to $600, I explained. "No man. Like, how much? I got the good stuff," he said. "Sir, you can pay by cash, check, or charge, but we do not accept other items in trade," I told him. "How much for that handgun?" another asked. "That Glock? It will be a little over $600 after tax," I replied. "And how much to have you guys convert it into a fully automatic pistol?" he asked. "Well, sir, that is a felony-level offense. If I get sent to jail, I could be facing several years in prison. Let us say I value my time at $1 million per year, so that would be $5,600,000, I said. "Oh," he muttered. "No sale for you either, sir." "Sir, you need to be wearing pants to purchase a firearm here," I told a customer wearing a shirt, boots, and chaps, but no underwear or pants underneath said chaps. "Hey, I cannot read. Can I have my buddy fill out the form for me?" one man asked. Nothing against people dealing with illiteracy, but having another person fill out the purchasing form for you is a huge no-no. "If I see somebody trying to rob me, I am gonna shoot them," a customer said. "Actually, sir, state law does not allow the use of deadly force to protect property, only to prevent grievous bodily harm, kidnapping, or arson," I explained. "That may be, but if someone breaks onto my property and tries to steal things, they are getting it. I have a lot of video cameras set up, so I will be good if I have to go to court," he replied. If he had said, "breaks into my house," things might have been different, but trespassing is not a crime that carries a death sentence. For the final one, I am actually going to answer a question you did not ask, OP. Once we sold a handgun to a nice little old lady. She had been burglarized and did not feel safe in her own home anymore. We spent at least an hour discussing good options for her before settling on a smaller, full-weight revolver. She thanked us and left. We learned the next week that she had used it on herself. It was a very sad moment, but at the same time, we all felt we had done our best to be on the lookout for such markers. She had been cheerful and happy, so quite probably she had made the decision and was relieved to be approaching her end. One of the things I took a lot of pride in as the manager of that store was how willing we were to turn down a sale. I have rarely seen other industries, bartending being one of the few, that take so much pride in empowering their employees to not make sales. Yes, there will always be a few scuzzy folks out there. The overwhelming majority of gun store owners and employees have no desire to risk their job or their federal firearms license just to close a sale. Story 14. There are a lot of factors that go into spotting a potential straw purchase. 1. Did they use the word gift? Most straw purchasers will claim the gun is for themselves, then show zero interest once it's presented. 2. Is someone else waiting in the car? That's a major indicator. 3. Were they on the phone before or during their time in the store? This could mean they're being instructed on what to buy. Many stores enforce a strict no cell phone policy for this reason, and also because it's extremely rude to be talking loudly while others are trying to shop. 4. What kind of firearm are they looking at? A target-oriented .22 LR pistol or other non-tactical rifles are generally not straw sale fodder. Larger caliber pistols, home defense shotguns, and modern sporting rifles are far more common in these cases. For example, a petite woman wanting a huge Glock 21 is almost always a red flag. It barely fits most hands, and while women can absolutely shoot and own large frame guns, it's not typical for someone inexperienced to request one. 5. Do they look familiar? Were they previously in the store with someone who was denied? Do they share the same last name or address as a recent denial? This one can be tricky because it relies on memory and the possibility of coincidence, but when combined with other factors and your gut feeling, it can be revealing. 6. Did they seem nervous? People knowingly committing a felony, even if they don't fully grasp the severity, often show some nervousness or shakiness. A spouse picking up a Christmas gift for their partner might be a little intimidated, but they usually aren't visibly nervous. 7. Did they use any specific language? For example, phrases like, "Yeah, my husband will love it. He's got lots of rifles, but he's always wanted this .22 LR. He's deer hunting this weekend, so I want to surprise him when he gets back." That kind of phrasing can be a red flag for a straw purchase. And there are probably more subtle signs I am not recalling right now. Have there been times when sales were wrongfully denied? Probably, but overall we've prevented far more straw purchases than any mistaken denials. Story 15. Purchasing a firearm with the intent to sell it, usually for a specific customer, is illegal in most cases. Typically, this happens because the intended recipient cannot buy the firearm themselves, either due to being prohibited or under the legal age. If you do not have a customer in mind, it is still illegal unless you hold a federal firearms license (FFL), because you are not supposed to purchase firearms with the intent to sell them. There are a few important exceptions. You can purchase a firearm as a gift, meaning you buy it with the intention of giving it to someone. You can also purchase a firearm and decide to sell it later. The key factor is intent. If you buy a gun for yourself and later decide you do not want it, you can legally sell it to a friend, sibling, grandparent, or anyone else because the original purchase was for personal use. You cannot knowingly sell or gift a firearm to a prohibited person. Doing so is a felony. It is uncommon to be charged with straw purchasing unless an undercover ATF agent approaches you outside a gun shop and asks you to buy a firearm and some ammunition, perhaps offering a small amount over the cost. Another situation could be buying multiple firearms at once, the ATF becoming curious, visiting your home a few days later, and you admitting you no longer have them. These scenarios are rare. The rules primarily exist to prevent people from buying guns for felon friends or others who might commit crimes. Federal firearms license holders are required to deny sales to anyone they suspect intends to use a firearm illegally. The ATF may occasionally test this by sending someone in to attempt a purchase and accidentally revealing it is for someone else. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.